Hey friends, welcome back to the Big Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Tricia Brouk, founder of the Big Talk Academy, award-winning director, producer, and author. And this is episode 545. This week, I am in conversation with the amazing Daniel Burns. Daniel is an ICF Certified Performance Coach, sales manager, author, and award-winning speaker. He is also the co-host of the Sales Problem Podcast, which empowers leaders to grow their business, increase their sales, and build thriving teams. Daniel is always striving for growth on his journey and is passionate about helping others transform into the best version of themselves too. All right, everybody, let's do this. Daniel, I am so excited to have you on the show. Welcome to the Big Talk Podcast.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
I have to say, I'm super honored and also kind of fangirling out, if I may say that. I got to see you perform at Speaker Slam because I was one of the judges, and I absolutely loved your performance. It was so spectacular.
Thank you so much. That means the world to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get into what you have coming up and everything that's going on, um, I want to just share with our listeners what we kind of talked about before we started recording. And that's that you're in India. It's 10 o'clock at night. First, I want to thank you for being on the show with me that late and share with our listeners why you're there.
Yeah, so I didn't want to miss this podcast. So I'm in India, from Canada to India for my daughter's wedding. So
That is
she
so
already had,
incredible.
she already had the wedding, and it was spectacular. It's very hot here, but traditional Indian wedding and amazing experience.
That is so beautiful. Share a little bit of what the traditional Indian wedding was like as a father of the bride.
Yeah, so there was a few different days. So started off with a reception and a lot of different food with a lot of spices that I'm not used to, but we did okay. A lot of different music, a lot of different traditions, but all of it is just amazing. And there was so much love. And one of the things that really struck me is just how uh, family oriented everyone is here. There was, I think, 550 people at the wedding. So
That's
it was
incredible.
huge.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Let's take it back now, and we can go back as far as you want. I'd love for you to share what your backstory is and how you came to be with me today on this show.
Absolutely. There's really two parts to my story. So the first part of it is, kind of my mission. So my brand is the BV Me Coaching, which stands for the best version of me. So really what I'm trying to do is, one, create the best version of myself, because I think it's really important that you lead by example. And certainly, I wouldn't ask anyone else to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. I think that's a guiding principle for me. But the other part of it is, I really want to serve people powerfully and help them create the best versions of themselves. So I fell in love with sales about 20 years ago. I've been in sales for a long time and started out, as a sales rep myself, and it was all about achievement. For me, there was so much in selling that, I could sell 10 units this year, and the next year I'd be, trying to sell 15. And then I'd try to be the number one sales rep, and I'd try to be at the president's club. And there were so many things that I could achieve. And so that, next version was, really possible within that sales world, but it was all about me. And then I became
Mm,
a manager and I started to manage people, and something really shifted. And suddenly it was not about achievement, but it was about contribution. So I had to be successful through a group of people. So my job really shifted, that I had to help them become successful in order for me to be successful. And helping them become a better version of themselves, that contribution ended up feeling really great. It was a different thing to see somebody else get up on stage and get that number one award. Somebody else from my team got up and they got onto the president's club, and being able to support them to get to that spot, it shifted from being about me to being about the we. So it was all about the team. So now I coach high potential salespeople who really want to solve the sales problem. And I call it the sales problem, but it's really a problem that a lot of people face. And that's, how do I perform 1 year and then continue into the next year and continue to grow? So if I sell $1 million this year, I know come 2023, I'm going to have to sell 1.5 million. So I try to help people in growing, and not just sales growth, but I think it's important to look at, how do people grow personally? How do they grow their mindset? How do you make sure they're healthy? So that's kind of my point of differentiation is, you can hit all your sales targets, but if you're sick and in the hospital, you know, that's no good. If you go home and you don't have a good relationship with your kids or your spouse, that's not great either. So it's really looking at what Simon Sinek says is, our job as leaders is to take care of the people and then have the people take care of the business. So that's really a big piece of my mission and my puzzle. And then the second half is, I asked myself a question in 2014 when I had a major shift, and that was, what did I want my best version to look like? And one of the things that came up for me was that I felt like I hadn't seen the world. So I made a big shift and I moved from Canada to Australia. And I sold everything I owned and I hopped on a plane. And that point was a big shift for me. And it happened because somebody walked into my life and helped cause that shift to happen. And if I could tell you a little story about him, his name was Johnny V. And he was a sales manager from Calgary. And he came in as a guest speaker to talk to my team and kind of fire them up and motivate them. And it was the first time, Tricia, that I really saw up close and personal somebody who was a really powerful speaker. He had such great passion. He had, amazing energy. He would, have very rational, logical points, and then he would move to making you laugh. And then he'd fall into a conversation where he invited you in, and, he had empathy and authenticity. And I just stood there and thought, I don't know exactly how he's doing this, but I want to figure out how to be that. That's a version that I would aspire to. So I got the chance to drive him back to the airport. And at the end of the day, before he got out of the car, he turned and he asked me a question that nobody's ever asked me. He said, Dan, do you have a dream? And it totally floored me because, that was a deep question. I wasn't expecting it. But I did have a dream and I hadn't told anyone. And it was that I said, John, someday I want to move to Australia. I don't just want to visit. I want to see another part of the world. I want to bring my family. I want to experience something. And he said, that's an amazing dream, but there's one problem. He said, you said the word someday. He said, we get Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but someday is never going to show up on your calendar. He said, Dan, I want you to take that word someday, completely remove it from your vocabulary. He said, because someday may never come. And that, just floored me. And he grabbed his bags, he got on the plane. And what I didn't know at the time is that those were actually the last words that Johnny V would speak to me. And several months later, he passed away from cancer. But before he left, he gave me that gift. Don't wait for someday, because someday may never come. And when I thought of that, I thought, if you want to change, if you want to get to a better version, you have to take action. The time is now. I sold everything I owned and jumped on a plane. So, that really made a big impact in me. And as I was on the plane, I thought, you know what, this is a new chapter for me. So what do I want it to look like? Not what, but who did I want to be? And I started planning out all the things that I liked and all the things I wanted to change. And now I go through that process with people when we talk about becoming a different version. We talk about, okay, here's the things that you are right now, but what would you like to be? Who would you like to be? And I take them through a process for that. So that's kind of my backstory. I think, we go through life, but what we really want is we want to grow through life.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that story so beautifully and so eloquently. And I have not met Johnny V. However, I feel like his legacy lives on in you, and I'm so grateful for that.
Can I share another little point? I don't know, if you're, into this type of thing, but a weird point is that he died October 13th, Tricia, and my birthday is October 14th. So just as he was dying, I was being born. And I feel like he just, passed that torch, and you have people come into your life for a reason. And it was just so special that I only got 3 days with him, but you can make an impact in somebody's life in just a small moment of time. And I really try to remember that even if, one person hears this, but it's my message that gets through to them, then, that can make all the difference.
Absolutely. And you are speaking my language in terms of how Source shows us the evidence that we are in alignment. And that was clearly an opportunity for you to be given that gift. When we think about what it means to be an influential voice and leaving a lasting legacy by sharing your message, this is a perfect example of Johnny V leaving a lasting legacy with you, and now you making it your purpose to teach all of us how to become the best version of ourselves. Were you aware of the power of your voice until that moment in time? And now that you know you have the power of your voice and how to share it with others for impact, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I don't think I have been aware up until recently, the power of my voice. And, when I started coaching people and really starting to use a framework, and really listening deeply, and then going out and speaking as well, I think I realized that I was starting to make an impact in people's lives, and that I had the ability to show up and serve very powerfully, and that people need support, and they need to hear your message. And it may not resonate with everyone, but for a lot of people, it can be that exact thing that they need at that exact moment. And I've had a few bits of feedback where I did speeches and people came up and said, my son is going through something similar to what you went through, and he really needs that message. Or I had someone else come up to me and say, because you shared powerfully, it inspired me to write my story in a book. So those type of moments show up, but it starts with putting yourself out there, which is a scary thing, but it can be a very rewarding thing. And I think that that's what Johnny V did. He showed up and he just gave of himself passionately, didn't know that it would connect with anyone. And luckily for me, I just happened to be there.
Amazing. When you think about what you learned from Johnny V in terms of speaking, performing, connecting intimately with your audience, can you unpack that for us a little bit, Daniel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the journey that I'm on, Trisha, is mastery. I think of speaking is an art, and there's so many details.
Yes.
You can do it very well, but then there's different levels. And Johnny V was a guy that showed me some of those different levels, especially with tone, and the way that he moved between points. Sometimes he was very rational and he appealed to that side of the audience. And then other times he was very emotional and his cadence changed and his vocal variety was there. And he really took you on a journey. kind of like a great song does. And there's so many different ways to play a song, but there's a side that's very masterful about how you put that together. So, for me, my journey is to figure out how to do that and move people, with my words and with my speeches.
I love all of this. And I also feel very strongly that speaking is an art form. And when you understand, there's two things: how to perform for impact, but also the responsibility that comes with being on a stage. So it's really important that you understand what you're saying has the ability to create good or evil, love or hate. And so understanding that responsibility while also embodying the performance and the technique. What have you relied on in terms of your writing technique, your performing technique, your choreography technique?
hmm So, a couple things come to mind. One, when I started speaking with Speaker Slam, one of the things that is part of their style is to really share, deeply. So it's being authentic, it's being vulnerable, it's sharing your story. And previously, in sales, it was all about talking about products and about concepts. So you just had to really be clear about what you were saying and explain things very well, but you weren't giving of yourself. You weren't being vulnerable when you were speaking. So recently, I think that's the biggest thing that has come out is being able to share authentically, so that it's not necessarily a performance, but it's just your honest self, and you're really putting your heart out there and you're connecting, with that energy. I also love, using movement. That's a big thing for me when I'm on stage. I like to move and talk to the room, different sides of the audience, to try to bring everybody that's there into what the story is, and connect in different places with different people, as if you're having a conversation, but it's a conversation with a big group. So there's a little more intimacy to that.
When you're in the writing process before you move into the performance process, what does that look like for you?
Oh, it is a labor of love, but it is a difficult one. So, for me, the writing process, I write a lot. So I have a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts around a topic. So, for a 4-minute speech, I know I need about a page and a half of writing, but I start with 4 or 5 pages because stuff just starts pouring out of me. But I don't really know exactly what the best parts are or what the most relevant pieces are. So for me, it's a process of getting all the ideas out, laying them all out, and then the editing process is the most painful part, deciding what to keep and what really resonates. And I like to break it into little pieces as if it's a puzzle, and then try to fit it together with, the right pieces. So then it shows the picture as clearly as possible to the audience.
Mm. Do you bring in outside eyes when you're editing?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't you find that when I'm editing my speakers' talks, it's so much easier for me to slice and dice because I'm not emotionally attached to any of it, and I can see it from that point of view. I think that is such a helpful thing is when we're writing something, we're emotionally attached to every single word. So how do you let go when you have outside counsel supporting you in the editing process?
Yeah, so I've had a few different coaches help me with the writing process. And, it comes back to, trusting in the person that you have hired. And, why bother hiring them if you're just going to do what you intended to do in the first place? So I really value the feedback of the people that work with me, and I take it on board and say, okay, let's just assume that they know better than I do, and let's go
Mm.
with that. the other part of it is still staying true to what my message is and saying
Yeah.
at times, you know what, I really value that feedback, and you might even be right, but I just feel passionate that I have to go in this direction. I might be failing in that particular aspect, but I feel connected to it and I have to go that route. So that's happened a few times as well.
Oh, that's such great advice. And I hope our listeners are taking this to heart. Really, really remember that it is your talk, it is your voice, and it's important to stay in alignment with what you know to be true for you, no matter who is giving you advice, always. Amazing. When you move into the memorization portion of your process, we're going to talk about that quickly in fast talk, but I want you to break that down because we're really talking about the art of speaking today. So, what is your process of memorization, Dan?
It's another part that I find very painful, but I go through so many different things that I do during any particular speech. But breaking it into those puzzle pieces, I start with I've got my takeoff. And I want to make sure that that intro is very powerful. And then I've got story one, story two, maybe even story three, and then I've got my landing. So I break it into those pieces and I try to just start by memorizing each piece. And then once I've got that kind of down, then I try to assemble all those pieces so that I can talk through it. But then I do some really weird things. I think, I I do my speeches in front of the dogs sometimes because they're making noise, they're running around. I have people
Distractions.
distractions because when you're speaking, lots of stuff pops out, and if you're not used to kind of having some chaos in the room, and they provide great chaos, then it helps you to be comfortable when things aren't perfect. And I'll rehearse with. I've got three friends that come on and do Zooms with me, and they listen and they give me feedback. But I actually ask them to scramble me up. So push me off
Mm.
direction, because if you forget a word and you have to kind of ad lib, I practice that. So I want them to kind of scramble me up in different sections of the speech, and I try to bring myself out of bounds and put myself back into the speech, but get comfortable in that kind of ad lib situation. So I do a lot of different things. I also do a schedule for myself. So I'll do 3 practice sessions in the morning and 3 practice sessions at night. So 6 times a day. And I do that for 2 weeks. And then that's 84 reps. So I'll pick the number and then I'll figure out how many repetitions a day. And then I'll subtract that from when I actually have to speak, and I build my schedule for how many reps I want to get in. And that gives me the confidence that if I've done it 50 times, 75 times, 100 times, then I've put in the work and everything else can just, fall to the wayside.
You are speaking my language and my community's language so brilliantly. I want to highlight some of what you're saying because it's just so spectacular. Takeoff and landing. I love that. It's not something I've ever heard before. And I love that that's how you approach your memorization and your performance. That's so cool. Storytelling, of course. Talking about having your friends scramble you up is so smart. And that's something that is really, really important for everybody to take away with today is that you're not going to be standing on a stage where it's perfectly quiet and nothing goes wrong. You're going to be standing on a stage with human beings in the audience who are going to sneeze and cough and look at their phones and order a drink and potentially, say amen or yay or, your name. So it's really important that you don't let those distractions get in the way of you doing your job. And then finally, the repetitions. I talk about dancers doing a million plies, right? We don't want to see how the dancer gets into the air. We just want to see the grand jeté and the perfect landing. So you breaking down your process into a schedule of 84 reps prior to taking a big stage is awesome. And I love that you talk about when you have set yourself up for success like this, there's no room for failure. And it doesn't mean that things can't go wrong while you're on stage, but you're literally putting yourself in a position where you will not fail. That's
Absolutely.
super high performance. I love it. I love it. Let's talk about what it was like for you to take the Speaker Slam stage. You are one of the winners, and I was on the judging panel, so clearly I voted for you. and
Thank you.
and I again thought it was an amazing performance. I'd love for you to talk about that specific stage because it's a very unique stage.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really an exciting stage to be on, and the group speaker slam is I just can't say enough positive things. It's such a heartfelt community. And even though it's a competition, backstage, everybody is giving each other support and encouragement. And, everybody's got their nerves, but everybody's coming together to really make sure that, when you go out there, you've got this love and support that's behind you. So I can't say enough about the community. The
Yeah, I it's Dan and Rona, right?
Yeah, Dan and Rena. Yeah.
Rena, Dan and Rena. And I have had conversations with Dan, who's awesome. And even seeing the two of them on stage, it's clear to me that they have created a community that's all about support. And I'm really glad to hear that that's what's going on backstage as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It was absolutely a phenomenal event. So, and being
Awesome.
able to share my story, when you've got an audience and you can really kind of open up and you've got the time to unpack your story, and you can feel it being received, and there's just so much love and support there. It's just a great opportunity.
What did it feel like once you were able to finish, walk off stage, and then be in receivership of such success?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little story. So, the very first public speaking competition that I did, I was in grade 10, and I got to the finals, Tricia, and I got up there on stage, and I was so nervous, and I had all these parents looking at me, and I went up to do my speech, and I completely froze. I was a deer in headlights. I was speechless in a speaking competition, and I
Oh,
left the stage and there was tears streaming out of my eyes, and I never wanted to public speak again, and I couldn't believe that I got up there and I failed. And that particular moment, even though I've spoken for the last 22 years in sales, sales is all public speaking, and I've gotten onto stages, I still get incredibly nervous. And you want your message to just flow out of you and connect with the audience, and you're visualizing this great experience, but you don't know how it's going to go. And the nerves are there for me right up until I say those first words. And then when I fall into that talk and I get comfortable, it's the best place in the world for me to be. It feels like
mm.
home. I get into that flow state. You can feel the energy from the crowd. And that's what happened at Speaker Slam. Everything came out of me exactly the way I had practiced it, the way I had hoped it would go. And that feeling, I was never the star athlete, but I can imagine, when you're throwing the touchdown and you're winning the state championship, that's the same feeling as being up there and getting to the end and having everybody stand and clap and know that your message got out there and that you connected as best as you could.
For sure. And you are masterful at it. You are truly an influential voice. And we are so lucky that you are sharing your message from big stages with the world.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You ready for some fast talk?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. What is your favorite book, Dan?
My favorite book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And that was the book that got me into self help and self improvement. And I still love it today. The book that I'm writing now is, based upon that type of format. So
Amazing. Who is your favorite speaker and why?
there's really two answers to that question, because my favorite speaker is Robin Sharma. And I saw Robin
Mm,
Sharma probably about 10 years ago, and I didn't blink once. I just couldn't take my
mm,
eyes off of him, and that mastery of craft comes through him. But my favorite talk is different. My favorite talk is the TEDx by Justin Baldoni, called Man Enough. And it's
love
all
it.
about, yeah, so masculinity, which I connect to.
Nice. We'll put all of these in the show notes as well so everyone who's listening can watch these talks and read these books. We talked about how you memorize. You beautifully and eloquently shared that. What do you do the day before you speak, whether it's on a stage or a podcast or a virtual stage?
So I generally take the day off work, so I can just not have any stress coming out of, places I don't expect it to come from. And I'm big on routine. So I like to stick to my normal routine. I don't like to introduce any new variables. I eat the same things. I make sure I get my workout in, but then I schedule. I schedule my practice, and then I schedule some time for de-stress, relaxation, doing things to kind of get my mind off of it, because I definitely have had times where I've over practiced, I've focused on it too much, and that can be a bad thing. So, and one of the unique things that I like to do is write out my fears. So I do
Mm,
have a lot of fear before getting up on stage, and what I found is that if I write everything down that I have as fears, and then just release that. So acknowledge that it's there, but absolutely just release that and say, you know what, it's okay that I'm feeling that. I can acknowledge that it's there, but I'm not going to let it stop me, and I'm not going to let it hold me back. That's one thing I started to do that's been helpful. And the last is, and I did in September of last year, I did a Navy SEALs training. And it was a 12-hour Navy SEALs training, the hardest civilian training on earth. And so you can imagine the stress that you put yourself under. And what they teach you is when you're under that stress, to do box breathing. So the box breathing, ends up helping to alleviate that fight or flight. So it
mm.
really starts to calm you down, works on your parasympathetic nervous system. So doing that box breathing really helps me de-stress.
That's amazing. And can you explain what box breathing is really quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very simple. So it's just, if you can imagine a box, you start with an inhale up, you hold it for 4, and then you draw across to the other side for a 4 count, and then you release it for 4. And then you stay in that release for another 4 seconds, and then you come up for 4. So it's like you're drawing a box in your mind, just with this nice cadence of inhale through the nose, exhale through the nose, and holding it at the top and the bottom.
Amazing help and tips for speakers. All right. What podcast are you currently obsessed with, Daniel?
All right, so there's two for this as well. So, Business Made Simple by Donald Miller is one of my latest favorites. And I just love the fact that he incorporates storytelling into sales and marketing. And I'm somebody who
Mm,
is very verbose. So he really makes things concise and precise. And I struggle with that. So I really value what he does there. And then the second one has to be the big talk. So, yeah,
wow.
podcast I have been binging on. So, and I love everything that you're doing. And it's because the energy that comes through in your podcast and how heartfelt and authentic you are, and the fact that I really feel like when I'm listening to you, you're there to serve. and that you're there to help people. So I've been binging on it, and I really love it. So,
Oh my goodness. I am so, so honored. And I really appreciate that. That means so much. It has been such a pleasure to have you on the show today. I'm so grateful that you are joining us from India, and it's very late there. And I want to know, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
yeah, so there's a few different ways. www.bvmecoaching.com is my website, or BVME as in best version of me underscore coaching. That's on Instagram or on YouTube.
Amazing. And can you talk about the book that's coming out so that we can be sure to get it when it's ready for pre-sale?
Yeah, so the book that I'm planning is a sales book. So for people that need inspiration and motivation as they're getting into their sales career, and it's called The Seven Gifts of Growth. Grow yourself and grow your sales.
Amazing. So, everybody, make sure that you sign up for Daniel's newsletter and get on his list so that when this book becomes available, you can grab it. Thank you, everybody, for dropping in with us today. I so appreciate you spending time with us. If you are watching this on YouTube, be sure to hit that notification and subscription bell so that you get access to our latest episodes. And hit me up on Instagram. Let us know what you loved, what you learned, what we can improve. I'm so grateful. Remember, your voice matters. Big love, everybody.